You're staring at the wreckage, wondering how something that felt so real could leave nothing but silence. The truth no one dares to say. She didn't love you. She never could. You were never the man she wanted. You were a function, a fleeting pulse in nature's cold game. Love was never about your heart or soul. It was a biological contract disguised as chemistry, a survival code playing out beneath your dreams. You weren't a person to her. You were a passage, a vessel, a placeholder for what nature demanded. And the worst part, you bought the illusion. You thought this was destiny when it was just instinct masked as passion. But in the ruins of what you called love, there lies a brutal awakening, an invitation to meet yourself, raw and unfiltered. This isn't a story of defeat. It's a reckoning, a call to stop chasing shadows and start reclaiming the man who vanished trying to keep her. Because only when you face this dark truth can you finally break free from the trap no one warned you about. He walked in thinking he was finally chosen for who he was, whole, raw, unmasked. But she never really saw him, not the man he believed himself to be. She saw a calculation, a utility wrapped in skin and words. That wound runs deeper than rejection. It's the fracture between expectation and cold nature. His ego crumbled where biology held no grace. The brutal truth is, nature doesn't bargain with sentiment. Schopenhauer's will is a relentless gambler, indifferent to individual dreams. It's a machine, ticking through survival's demands, selecting not for love, but for continuation. She wasn't captivated by his soul, but by the survival code embedded deep in her unconscious. Her attraction wasn't admiration or sacred desire. It was unconscious arithmetic. His charm, his scars, his ambitions, they were all just variables in a formula she didn't even know she was solving. Like a wolf choosing prey not for its beauty but for its weakness or strength, her instincts navigated the landscape without sentiment or pause. He was the packaging, the voice, the laugh, the scent, mere wrapping on a product designed to pass inspection. She wasn't investing in him, she was extracting what she needed. And when her needs changed, so did her interest. The cruel irony? His personality was never the point. It was the disguise nature chose to cloak her survival strategy. He blamed himself for not being enough, but the ego cannot thrive where biology holds no mercy. It's a silent war. The man wants meaning. The will demands function. She was never meant to see his wounds or his hopes, only the utility he brought. To survive is to be useful. To be loved is a myth, whispered by the ego trying to heal. This isn't about cynicism, it's about awakening. About understanding that the story he told himself was a beautiful lie crafted by the ego's hunger for connection. His longing for significance blinded him to the primal dance underneath. A dance choreographed not by hearts, but by genes and ancient hunger. Remember the addict who believes the drug loves him back. He confuses need for love and possession for devotion. Just like the man who mistook her presence for choosing him, he failed to see the projection. The wound was not her absence, but his refusal to see what was never there in the first place. This is where the journey begins, not with bitterness, but with brutal clarity. He wasn't broken for being used, he was asleep, and waking up means looking past the myth of love and into the cold, beautiful machinery of survival. Next, he'll have to confront what it means to be expired, not betrayed. He thought her leaving was a failure on his part, a personal rejection carved into his soul. But nature doesn't honor loyalty, it honors adaptation. The moment she walked away, it wasn't because he lost value, it was because her unconscious blueprint rewrote the equation. He wasn't abandoned, he was obsolete. Heartbreak echoes not from betrayal, but from being decommissioned by an evolutionary strategy older than civilization. She moved on like a machine resetting, optimizing, trading parts without regret or nostalgia. His pain was the residue of usefulness evaporating. Nature doesn't mourn what no longer serves. He replayed every moment, trying to find the crack, the misstep, the flaw he could fix. But no personal failure caused her departure. It was the cold calculus of survival, indifferent to human meaning. She didn't break a promise, she recalibrated the data. He was not a man discarded, he was a function terminated. That sting of loss is an illusion. It's not a soul retreating, it's a system upgrading. Like a software update that leaves an old device behind, she evolved beyond the compatibility he once offered. The deeper wound, believing that love was an unchanging contract rather than a dynamic survival algorithm. He mistook loyalty for eternal truth, but in the wild game, loyalty is currency, spent only while profitable. When the investment no longer yields, withdrawal is automatic and without remorse. His identity, once intertwined with her presence, unraveled in silence, a ghost of relevance fading into the void. This is the cruel genius of nature. She rewards not the faithful, but the fit. Adaptation outpaces sentiment every time. To grieve like a failure is to ignore the real truth. He was never meant to last. His role was temporary, a chapter written to be closed, not a story meant to be immortal. He wrestled with the pain, the absence, the echo of her footsteps, not realizing it was an expiration notice stamped in invisible ink. The heartbreak wasn't personal, it was functional. The universe didn't collapse, it simply optimized its next move. And in this, there is a brutal kind of freedom. Now comes the reckoning, to stop demanding permanence from what is transient, and to face the masculine soul's collapse when it mistakes expiration for betrayal. This wound opens the door to a deeper truth he's yet to meet. He demanded forever, love as an eternal flame, flawless, divine, unshakable. But the masculine soul is fragile when it clings to ideals nature never intended to keep. Emotional purity is a fairy tale sold to men desperate for meaning in chaos. His collapse wasn't from loss, but from expectation, a ghost he hung on like a noose. Jung understood the anima's double edge. The woman we chase is often a shadow of our own fractures. She's less a person than a mirror reflecting a wound we refuse to face. He begged her to save what he broke in himself. No matter how fiercely he pleaded, no woman can stitch a soul fractured by unmet inner war. She wasn't sacred. She was a mirror, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, but always reflecting his own unhealed wounds. The mother lost, the tenderness never received, the fragment of himself he tried to outsource. He mistook her presence for salvation, but found only his own fragmentation multiplied. This is the silent tragedy of many men, the projection of wholeness onto another who never signed that contract. He wanted a divine rescue. She was just human, imperfect, and bound by her own survival. Demanding divinity from a biological strategy is a recipe for ruin. The collapse was inevitable, built into the very structure of his longing. He wanted her to be constant, but she was an echo of his own chaos. Like an addict craving clarity from a drug, he sought in her what he refused to find within. The feminine was not a balm, but a challenge, a call to do the harder work of facing his own shadow. Until he did, the dance would always end in despair. The mask he wore to keep love alive slowly suffocated him. Vulnerability without boundaries became self-abandonment. He was not just betrayed by her withdrawal, but by his own refusal to see love as a battlefield of archetypes, not fairy tales. Jung would say, integration begins with recognizing the anima's trickery, not blaming her for it. He's standing now at the edge, heart heavy with the weight of impossible ideals. The feminine he worshipped was never the goddess he imagined, but the wound he ignored. This collapse is the crucible, not the end, but the invitation to confront what real love demands, not purity, but presence. And in this reckoning he must learn that no woman carries the keys to his wholeness. He must become the man who no longer makes her responsible for his soul's restoration. The journey inward is brutal, lonely, but it's the only place to find what he's truly seeking. He mistook the rush of dopamine for destiny, the spike of chemicals for sacred truth. But what he called love was nature's bait, an illusion scripted by biology to ensure reproduction, not happiness. Schopenhauer nailed it. Love is the hunter's trap, not the lover's prize. His heartbreak wasn't loss, it was detoxification. She didn't change, his chemistry did. The flood of hormones that once drowned his logic began to fade, leaving his mind clear but cold. What once seemed like a connection was nothing but emotional intoxication, a high that nature pulls back once the mission is halfway done. He was addicted, not devoted. Addiction to feeling is the cruelest form of captivity. He chased the mirage of devotion, confusing it for loyalty. But the craving wasn't for her, it was for the feeling she triggered. When that neurochemical fog lifts, the soul is left naked, aching for the very intoxication it once worshipped. Most heartbreaks don't come from abandonment, but from detox, the slow, painful process of disentangling from the addiction to emotional chaos, the frantic need to feel alive in the silence of emptiness. The wound is raw because it's not a wound of the heart, it's a withdrawal of the soul's narcotic. He wanted forever, but got a chemical contract. His mind scrambled for meaning in the aftermath, trying to glue together what was never whole. She was never the source of his devotion. She was the trigger of a reaction he mistook for love. That realization burns colder than any betrayal. This is the raw anatomy of romantic collapse, an illusion powered by hormones disguised as fate. The same neurochemical cocktail that made him feel alive is now the ghost haunting his nights. And yet, in that ghost lies a chance to rewrite the story beyond addiction and into conscious presence. It's no consolation to learn you were never truly in control, but it is freedom. Freedom from illusions sold by the biology of survival. His task now is to walk through the hangover, to face the silence that follows the storm, and to find himself in the sober light after the high. The next step demands he stop chasing feelings and start chasing truth, not in her, but in the fractured depths of his own craving. The journey from intoxication to clarity is the crucible every man must pass through before he can stand steady. He thought showing his wounds would pull her closer, that vulnerability was the key to deeper love. But vulnerability isn't a constant state. It's a moment's currency, not a lifelong debt. She wasn't waiting for his collapse. She was seeking the strength to stand beside. Timing is the silent ruler in love's game. Confessing pain too early turns instinct into recoil. Like a wolf retreating from a sudden scent, her primal self pulls back when she senses weakness where she expected safety. She craves the masculine steadiness that can hold the chaos, not drown in it. His openness became a flood she couldn't navigate. He believed honesty would be his shield, but instead it became ammunition. What he revealed too fast was twisted into his downfall. The wounds he bared without boundaries fed her doubts, not her devotion. Trust isn't given by confession. It's earned in measured presence, like a steady flame, not a blaze. Confidence isn't about silence. It's about mastery over chaos. She's drawn to a man who doesn't unravel at her edges, but anchors them. The paradox. True vulnerability demands first a solid ground beneath it, or it collapses into self-abandonment. He needed to build the fortress before opening the gates. She desired a warrior, not a wounded animal. His fragility scared her because it spoke of surrender, not survival. What she sought was not the depth of pain, but the depth of presence. Someone who could hold the storm without losing himself. He confused, breaking down with breaking through. He learned too late that timing is everything. There's a rhythm to unveiling truth, a dance where each step matters. Offering emotional depth too soon is like diving into cold water without preparation. It shocks and repels. She needed a man who could weather the storm, not disappear into it. This isn't a call to hide wounds or pretend strength. It's a call to understand that what you reveal too fast becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. Confidence is not denial, but measured courage, choosing what to expose and when. The masculine soul thrives in balance, not in endless confession. And so the man stands at the crossroads between collapse and steadiness, between reckless honesty and guarded presence. The journey ahead is to learn that strength in love isn't the absence of pain, but the mastery over when and how it's shown. This is the lesson waiting in the next wound. He gave everything, erased himself in the hope that love would bloom in the void he created. But sacrifice is not currency here. It's a confession of weakness, dressed as devotion. The more he bent, the more she leaned away. Nature doesn't reward martyrdom. It recoils from it like fire from oil. He believed love could be earned by self-erasure, by fading into shadows to illuminate her world. Instead, every compromise was logged as deficiency, not devotion. She didn't see his sacrifice as strength. She saw a man losing his spine. And what survives when a man folds into her needs? Nothing but silence. The feminine doesn't fall for the broken man. It withdraws from him. Martyrdom isn't love. It's a slow death sentence for desire. She wants presence, not absence. She craves the man who stands, not the one who collapses under the weight of his own surrender. He kept giving, hoping she would see the good in his sacrifice. But what she saw was a man unfit to lead, too worn to inspire. His selflessness became a mask for self-abandonment, a veil that hid the man she once desired. She didn't betray him. She responded to the version he became to keep her. Every inch he lost in himself was a step she took away. And in that silent exchange, love died. Not from malice, but from imbalance. She wasn't the enemy. The enemy was the man who mistook sacrifice for strength and forget that nature rewards standing tall, not falling low. This is the raw truth. The more he sacrificed himself, the faster he was forgotten. The story he told himself about love was just a shadow play, a dance between giving and disappearing. Nature doesn't applaud the man who fades. It elevates the one who holds firm. He's left holding memories of a love that never knew his real shape, only the one he distorted to fit her needs. The price of sacrifice was not love, but erasure, and erasure breeds only absence, the cold echo of a man lost to his own delusions. Now he must decide, continue the slow fall into oblivion, or reclaim himself before the last trace of desire is gone. The journey ahead demands standing, even when the world expects him to kneel. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. He believed he was irreplaceable, the one and only in her story. But she never wanted him. She wanted the reflection of herself he stirred. Jung taught that the self projects archetypes, not truths. She wasn't drawn to the man, she was addicted to the version of herself that blossomed near him. The feeling he ignited was a drug more potent than any promise. She chased the high of validation, the mirror of desire that made her feel alive and seen. When that emotional mirror cracked, so did her yearning. The man disappeared, but the absence of the reflection was what left her hollow. She wasn't in love with him. She was in love with what he represented: freedom, excitement, escape from her own void. The man was the vessel for the feeling, not the destination. When the feeling faded, so did her presence. Desire is never for the man himself, but for the state he awakens. He confused her addiction for affection, mistaking her craving for commitment. But what she sought was the spark, the illusion of transformation, not the steady fire of presence. She wanted to feel alive in his orbit, not tethered to his reality. And when that illusion dissolved, she left, quietly, without ceremony. This is the cruel paradox of masculine desire, to be wanted not for who you are, but for what you bring to the stage of her psyche. She loved the feeling he created more than the man behind the mask. When that feeling no longer served her, he became invisible, just another ghost in her emotional archive. He was the source of her highs and lows, her moments of elation and despair. But he was never the core of her love. She was chasing herself, and he was just the mirror she broke when she stopped recognizing her own reflection. What she missed was not him. It was the feeling he sparked within her. This isn't a betrayal. It's the anatomy of desire exposed. She didn't want a man. She wanted a feeling. He wasn't the anchor. He was the wave, rising and falling with her shifting needs. And in the silence that followed, he's left to confront what it means to be a man without the reflection he once carried. Now the question becomes, can he stand without the mirror? Can he be whole without the feeling she created? The next step is to stop chasing reflections and start becoming the source. He felt it like fate, a cosmic bond that tethered his soul to hers in a way that defied reason. But Schopenhauer saw through the veil. Attraction is the will using him to continue itself, not a sacred union. What he called love was just an echo of ancient survival, pulsing beneath the surface. The universe never aligned to bless him. It aligned to reproduce itself. She wasn't the soulmate. She was the symbol, a living emblem of life's ruthless persistence. His longing wasn't spiritual. It was biological code masquerading as destiny. The cosmic pull was not personal, it was functional. He believed in a story of soulmates, but the story was written by the will to live, indifferent to happiness or pain. Love was never about him. It was about survival's script playing out through his body. The passion, the obsession, the heartbreak, they were all echoes of a deeper machinery, cold and indifferent. That sense of once in a lifetime was a trick of the will. A moment when the machinery briefly makes him feel chosen, special, alive. But beneath that feeling lies the same force that will discard him when the function is fulfilled. It's not betrayal, it's biology recalibrating. He carried the weight of this truth like a scar no one else could see. The brutal realization that love was never personal, never sacred. The longing to belong, to be chosen for who he truly was, met only cold calculation. The will's hands are never gentle, they mold without mercy. In the silent spaces after love fades, he faces the abyss, not of loss, but of awakening. The spiritual moment comes not when love ignites, but when he admits it wasn't personal. The freedom in that admission is brutal but liberating. It strips illusion and leaves raw clarity. She was never the end of his story. She was the messenger of a deeper truth, one he couldn't face until the illusion broke. Survival, not love, was the puppeteer. And understanding this is the first step toward reclaiming his own will. Now he stands at the threshold of something darker and deeper, a place where survival gives way to conscious choice, where the echo of forgotten survival becomes the call to awaken. What if everything you were chasing in her, the love, the meaning, the validation, was just what you abandoned inside yourself? What if the voice that keeps telling you you're not enough is actually the call to become more? You've seen the illusions, felt the fractures, and stood at the edge of a collapse. Now the real question is, will you rise as the man who no longer needs to be saved by her? Or will you remain a shadow chasing a reflection? This journey isn't about fixing love. It's about fixing the man who believed in love's lies. It's brutal, lonely, and merciless, but it's the only way out of the labyrinth of your own making. So, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep walking this path of brutal self-knowledge and raw freedom. Because the man you need to become is waiting on the other side of the silence you're afraid to face. You've seen how love was never really about you, just nature's game. Now, let's step deeper into the shadows. Why women follow instinct, not promises, and what that means for every man caught in between. This is where the real reckoning begins.